Hey, welcome to the channel where we're going to show you how to put some prep in your step. Today I want to talk about creating a historical or snapshot table using Tableau Prep. I've run into this situation a few times, specifically around creating like a backlog snapshot because the statuses of, let's say, tickets, for example, those statuses are going to change on a day-to-day basis, but I need to be able to measure if those changes are positive or negative, week over week, month over month, what those changes are actually looking like. Am I progressing and reducing my backlog, or is my backlog still increasing and I can't keep up with it? So we're going to use the sample Superstore data set, and let's dive into it. So I've connected to my sample Superstore data set. I'm just going to pull in the orders table. And because I know that this table has the order date column and it has dates that are in the future, I can kind of use it to mimic what like a daily snapshot would look like. Now I want to measure the shipment backlog. So if the order date has happened but the ship date hasn't happened yet, then I'm gonna measure that as being in my backlog. And I want to see a snapshot of how that number is changing every day. So I'm gonna add in a clean step here. And I've got my order date there. So what I'm going to do here is create a calculated field. And I'm going to call this one current date. And just use the today function. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And I'm going to drag this over here just to make it easier for me. So now if my order date is less than or equal to my current date, but my ship date is greater than my current date, then I know that that shipment hasn't happened yet. It's still in my backlog. So I'm going to create a calculated field, call this one shipment backlog, and say if my order date is less than or equal to my current date and my ship date is greater than my current date. And then I want to pull back my order ID because I know that an order can have multiple records based off of the item IDs associated with it. So I just want to do a count of my orders. So pulling back the order ID will allow me to do that. All right. So now I've got some IDs that are in my backlog. And just to sort of verify, if I click on one, okay, so we can see the order date was on the 13th, but the ship date was on the 20th. And so that shipment hasn't happened yet, it's in my backlog. So now I'm gonna add an aggregate step, and I want my backlog to be really simple. So I just wanna see a date and the number of shipments that are still in the backlog on that date. So I'm gonna pull in my current date field, and then I'm gonna pull my shipment backlog into my aggregated fields and do a count distinct, since this is an order ID that it's pulling back. And so now we can see on the 18th, which is today, there was 19 shipments in the backlog. I'm going to add a clean step here just so I can go in and rename my field. I could do that in the aggregate step, but I really like to segment out what each step is doing. It's good for your process, so that way when you're doing some documentation, you can go back in and document and segment out. Clean steps are where the changes happen. Aggregate steps is where the aggregation happens. So there we go. And I'm just going to use, I'm going to go to my output here, and I'm going to output to an Excel just for, testing purposes. And I'm going to output to my Tableau Prep repository. I'm going to call this shipment backlog snapshot. Okay. I'm going to call the worksheet backlog, and I'm going to do this append table, or leave it as append table as the full refresh, because on the first run it's going to create that sheet, and on each subsequent run it's just going to add the next snapshot to the table. So I'm going to go ahead and run that now. All right, and now I'm going to open that sheet. Okay, there's my sheet, and it's got my 818 and my shipment backlog. Awesome. So we know that it's working how we expected it to work. So now let's say that my date is, and now we're in the next day, which is going to be tomorrow. So to mimic that, I'm just going to say my current date is today +1. And if you look at my output step, now it only has the next date and not the previous date. So Tableau Prep does have the option to go into your input step and enable incremental refreshes. And if I was trying to save on some processing time and make a table that was going to have records added to it each day, that's an approach I would want to take. But to create a snapshot, a historical table that's really simplified, this is the approach that I'm going to take, because I just want my output to add the snapshot for the day into the table as time goes on. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. So it'll add the 19th and the backlog that was there on the 19th. I'm going to run this a few times to build up a sort of snapshot. And you can even see when it did the output step, it only generated one row. It's only adding one row at a time to my snapshot. And so I would set this on a daily refresh. So every day my current date would change, and I would have that snapshot added to my table. And I would probably run it at the end of the day just to sort of get an end of day picture of my backlog. So let's just going to keep adding a couple in here just to build up a little bit of a database. Let's add 2 more. So let's apply and run that one. And one more. So this will be a couple days worth of our snapshot. Okay, so now I'm going to open up my sheet again to see what that table looks like. And there we go. So you can see the backlog was increasing for a few days, and then it started going back down. So that's how you create a really simple historical table, a snapshot table. One thing to caution when you're creating historical tables is the granularity of the data. If I was doing the granularity at the order ID and trying to create a historical table of those orders that were in the backlog each day, that data set can get really, really big really, really quickly. And so if that's an approach that you need to take to answer the questions that are behind this use case, then you'll really want to examine how big do we cap this data set at, and once it reaches that, are we leaving enough history there, and is it appropriate to go back in and start deleting some of the earliest records in that table. It's just a little bit more on the planning that you have to go if you're going to take that approach. I usually, when I'm employing this type of use case, I'm keeping it really simple, as granulated as possible, or as aggregated as possible, sorry, because I'm just trying to see how that number's trending. So just some things to be aware of. If you got some value out of this video, or if there's a different way you would approach it, let me know in the comments. I'll be sure to check those out, and I hope to see you in the next one.